I'm going to talk about wireframes and style guides in regards to mobile app design and web design. So if you've taken me for other classes or lessons, this might be a bit of a review, but also a little bit more in depth with wireframes and how style guides can help your design. So wireframes are also known as page schematics or screen blueprints. It's a visual guide that represents the skeletal framework of a website. Wireframes are created for the purpose of arranging elements to best accomplish a particular purpose. The purpose is usually being informed by a business objective or creative idea. So here are some other options for wireframes. These are what I've shown you so far are digital options. So this is obviously created on a computer and not hand-drawn, but gives the designer the ability to go ahead and start working on the layout of the website or mobile design, which I'm going to show examples of here in a second. But most of the time when you're starting off with a wireframe, you're kind of breaking it. It's kind of like creating a puzzle. So you want to focus on what the website's objectives are, so what needs to be the focal point, as well as how the navigation will work. Here's an example of CNN's website and just kind of overlaying what the wireframe used to look like. So CNN is a very, very large corporation, and you can see the navigation is quite extensive, as well as it's a news organization, so having more of a newspaper type layout where you can include as much information as possible is part of their objective. So whenever you're working on a website, you'll kind of see how things are broken up. In fact, when websites were first starting to come out, web design was starting to make its way out of just the bitmap screen. A lot of designers were using Photoshop to create their designs and literally slicing the entire page up so that it can be broken up into multiple JPEGs or multiple files. And then you could create a button in Photoshop, cut it out, and that little file would be your link. And so one reason why we have this concept of frames and wireframes is because that's where web design came from, and a lot of new designers are really challenging that idea that it doesn't necessarily need to be in frames. We have the ability to create some really nice negative space and animation and embedding different elements into the site. So here's an example of a sketched out wireframe. I want to encourage all students that you do not need to have any kind of drawing experience to create a hand-drawn wireframe. You can see here that these are all just squares and circles and writing out text for the most part. And for that text that is a little bit smaller, it's represented in just lines. So even you can see where it says search pop-up, even those little squares are not perfect. So if you're hesitant about drawing, please don't be. If you're more comfortable doing this assignment in a program like XD or Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign, please feel free to do that as well. And I'm just going to show you some different examples of how to create these wireframes. So a lot of times when you're working in teams and you have quite a bit of content, sometimes it's a little bit easier just to cut things out and rearrange them together. So here's an example of just creating squares and boxes so that you have the ability to rearrange them. And you'll notice that the boxes with the X's in them versus other boxes, anything with an X in it usually represents an image or a file or a custom illustration. So you can kind of get an idea of what's just a box or a button versus what is an image. So here is a wireframe that shows the different elements. Without the X's in the middle, you have the actual picture icon. And one reason why this is super helpful, especially for designers, is to go ahead and create this, is to, one, create a good vision for your team so that they know kind of like what the overall visual output will look like, as well as it gives the team an idea of what content is needed. So you can see here in the first frame, or the first artboard, the homepage needs a certain amount of recently viewed images, a certain amount of explore images, and even in XD it'll give you the exact pixels. So when someone is out taking pictures, they know whether to, say in this artboard that's called hotel detail, they'll know that that picture needs to be horizontal, as well as give some space for that title there at the bottom. And even below that, it's even more of a panoramic image. So it helps when you're building content to know what sizes you need, how much content you need, and what elements will be added on top or along with the content. So whenever you get started on your wireframe, the first thing is to first, of course, figure out what device you are designing for, whether it's a mobile, iPad, website. We're going to be using, obviously, mobile for an app, but the first step is just understanding what scale you're working with. And step 2 is draw your design navigation first. So one reason why you do that is because your navigation is going to appear in every single page. So you want to make sure that that navigation works well with all of your wireframes per artboard. Step 3 is center your design around the product. So whether it's a process or an actual product or a digital product, or the main objective of the app needs to be pretty clear and pretty centered. Step 4 is to add image blocks. So think about the main images that you'll need for your user journey. What kind of illustrations do you need to help the user understand how to use the app or understand the objective of the app? Step 5 is to add the CTAs, which stands for calls to action. So a call to action is, for products, it's easy. It's the buy now button, or the subscription button, or maybe you have multiple steps in your app. So you want to have that call to action very clear and very bright for the user. And then lastly, consider the user journey. So when you're creating these wireframes, consider how the user will use the app. So, what does the very first screen look like? If they click on the home button, or the about button, or the contact button in this example, where did those go? And then you can organize your artboards, not necessarily linearly, but in steps and journeys.